Strava KOMs, YouTube videos, and cookies don't usually figure in a retirement plan for a former professional road cyclist. But Phil Gaimon's self-titled worst retirement ever is anything but normal. After 10 years of racing at the highest level, he's now forged a career as a Strava KOM hunter and sharing his love of climbing and cycling adventures on a popular YouTube channel. So far from slipping quietly into retirement, he's busier than ever. But he found time to chat with us today to share his love for climbing, how you get a Strava KOM, what's the best cookie, what's the hardest climb he's ever conquered, and many more tips in the following video. So sit back and enjoy. So Phil, you're well known for your love of climbs and particularly chasing KOMs. What's the secret to getting a KOM?
I don't think it's much of a secret. I think the way that I did it was I just raced professionally for 10 years and then put more work into KOMs than anyone ever had or should, who really competed at like a high level. Yeah, that was the trick was really hard training and racing.
That's quite a big marginal gain, isn't it? Being a pro for 10 years.
Yeah, it's not marginal at all.
So what have you learned since retiring and becoming well known for chasing KOMs?
Sure.
I think just about fitness and doing interval training, or is there more to it than that?
I mean, the start of it was definitely just like having the years of all the work behind me, and kind of being able to just, fitness. The main thing to do was just to be stronger than anyone else who was really putting effort into Strava, which just, especially at the time, like a lot of pros weren't really playing with it. So it just kind of wasn't that competitive. And then even the ones who were trying, they weren't using a speed suit and a super light bike. So I kind of came from like, as a pro, I was probably like top 30, 40 climbers in the world at that point, which like doesn't really pay the bills, sadly. But when you go to Strava, it's just not that hard from where I was to where that was. I definitely learned one thing that I was really surprised by, to be honest, was how little my fitness kind of trailed off. I sort of thought, because just as a pro, you're so rigid, you're so regimented. You think that that's just critical. And then the year after I stopped, I would ride for fun. I would do the group ride. I would, go for a KOM twice a week. Like I wasn't doing nothing, but I wasn't doing, here's 3x20. Here's, putting your feet up, like the super dorky stuff that I'd been doing for 5-10 years. I wasn't doing. And what I did notice was, because I wasn't trying to be fast, for 7 days in a row. I wasn't training to have the super high level and do, 60 race days. For my for the YouTube Strava thing, I only really had to be good like twice a week, a couple times a month. And what I found for that was that was even easier. And like the end of it, I was like, I just did 400 watts for an hour. I don't think I ever did that before. But that's because I was just carrying around fatigue and mixing intervals and doing, as a pro, you also have to, be able to sprint and do 1 minute stuff. So you're training everything. Whereas like I just started only training climbing, only doing rides that I like. And for a minute, I got marginally better at it. And since then I've gotten marginally worse every year, which is fine. I'm 36. So
how does it compare doing a Strava KOM now, compared to racing up a hill in a event like Tour de France? Are they equally hard, or is racing harder in a pro peloton compared to doing a Strava KOM?
I'll start with, I never did the Tour de France, but I'm sure that racing is harder. But the thing is, it's the competition is, it's the harder the hill is, the more it's just the competition who's on it. So I would say, like, if I'm going for a KOM on Alpe d'Huez, that would be harder than doing the Tour de France. It'd be literally impossible.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So if you're trying something that like you can't do, that's going to be that hard. Having someone in the race, having a wheel to push you or to be staring at, is definitely like a motivator. But I've certainly found like I go hard for a climb and I'm completely empty at the end of it, and I don't think there's not much different feeling between that and the end of like a hard race back in the day. I'm just going a little bit slower.
How do you prepare for a Strava KOM effort? And what's your sort of the day look like in terms of breaking it down to prepare for that?
On the day, I would compare it. I mean, essentially, like an uphill KOM uh, would be comparable to an uphill time trial. So that's kind of what I would
Okay.
compare it more to a time trial than a race. For a race, you're thinking about the early breakaway. You're thinking about eating enough for a 4 or 5 hour thing. For a KOM that I'm like going out to do a video for and trying to really get my best performance, I would probably do the same thing I would do for any uphill TT, which would be like a very light breakfast, because realistically, like, your ride only has to be an hour and a half max between like the warm up and the actual effort, depending on how hard the climb is. Most of the climbs I do are between like 5 and 20 minutes. Um, and so yeah, light breakfast, kind of early. Try to do it early so I don't get hungry during the day. Um, any breakfast I do would be like pretty carb based. Um, and then basically you would time it where you finish breakfast 3 hours before you're trying to start riding, so you have time to digest, poop, and then like a basic warm up. My warm up routine has been the same for forever, honestly. Where I don't look at power, I just look at heart rate. And what I'll do is because it's about your body, it's not about your output, it's about what you can do. So that's why the heart rate is like the more valuable metric, I think, because different days it'll be different. But what I'll do is I'll just ride easy for 10, 20 minutes, just kind of spin the legs, and then I'll slowly ramp up my effort until I see heart rates in a 10 beat increment. So I'll like, okay, I'll put a little bit harder and I'll see 130, and then I'll back it off for a couple minutes and recover, and then I'll ramp it up a little bit to 140 and then back it off. So you're slowly kind of getting your body ready to go hard. Um, and then depending on the day, like normally the heart rate that I would target in an effort would be in the 170, 175. So I'll try to like see 170 once in the warm up, and then back it off. And that's kind of just how my body's ready. And then 5, 10 minutes later, I can go for it. So I'm never like pushing,
Okay.
I'm never holding a hard effort in that warm up, but I'm getting my body used to it. Um, and in that time, usually I can do that as I'm like reconning whatever climb I'm looking at. Um, so I can kind of kill two birds with one stone there. Yeah, then I let it rip.
And when you let it rip on the climb, are you using data when you ride? Are you riding by feel, or do you use like a virtual partner to try and see where you are compared to the time on that climb?
The If there's anything I learned from the retirement, it's the value of Strava live segments on the Wahoo, which I didn't. It's funny. I remember, like, I went for the first video I did was Palomar, that's outside of San Diego, um, and I go for it. I upload and I missed it by 8 seconds, and I didn't. And I was like, damn, it's an hour long KOM,
Wow.
and I was like, I just missed it. And I remember the comments on that video were like, how does a pro not know about Strava live segments? Because I didn't know until I uploaded it. And my thought was like, how would a pro know about Strava live segments? Like, we do races. Like, you're not looking at. I'm guessing some of those guys do it now because it is a super useful tool. Like, if I was in a race, I would want to have the graphic of like, okay, the climb's going to flatten out here. It's like looking at the course map, which would be super useful. But back then I did not. So I do use that now. Um, but basically it's a combination of that and kind of my perceived effort. But really, what I'm looking at is my target time for the climb. So say in general, say it's a 15 minute. The current KLM's 15 minutes. I'm going to pace myself to be dead at 14 minutes and hope that I'm finished by then.
Okay.
And then if you have to run on fumes, the last like 30 to 40 seconds, that's usually doable. But that's basically what I look at, is like I'm gonna have an empty tank at a time that's faster. Everybody's done it before, and hope that's enough. And then I'm looking at the gradients on the live segment to see like, okay, here's the steep part. I definitely want to push harder here. Here's where I can recover a little bit. Here's a part that's flat, so I'm going to save it. And I kind of just do that as I go by feel.
And I imagine you know fairly soon in the segment how you're feeling in terms of how you're likely to beat that climb. And if you're not likely to beat it, do you back off and save yourself another effort, like the next day perhaps, or do you just give it your full beans and see what you get?
It depends on the climb. If I'm generally, like, if I traveled somewhere and I've got a camera person or whatever, like, I don't really have the luxury of let's kick it to tomorrow. And second place is fine, or third place, whatever. Like, what I'm looking for isn't the result as much as putting in my best effort. And if my best effort is a minute down, then so be it. Um, so yeah, I haven't had to like completely axe anything mid ride in the videos. When I'm out like training and I'm going for a KOM in my neighborhood, essentially like that, I consider that more training if it's local and I'm not kind of filming something. And in those cases, for sure, if my body's not feeling it, I'll back off, or if I'm not going to get like the result I'm looking for.
Okay.
But generally, it's just like here's the process. I'm trying to do a good workout. Fingers crossed that something else happens.
Okay. Do you know how many KOMs you currently hold, and which is the toughest one you've currently claimed?
Ooh. No, I don't, and it's hard with Strava knowing how many you have because there's segments within segments.
Okay, yeah.
So like a lot of climbs you go for, and I get the KOM from the bottom to the top, but I'll get 60 in the middle.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
so like that does I just don't think that counts
No.
because people make too many segments. Um, so no, I don't really know how many legitimate KOMs I actually have. Um, but what was the second part of that question? Sorry, I lost you.
Which is the toughest one you've currently
Oh,
claimed?
the
The hardest
toughest
one.
one, the one I like to talk about is Mauna Kea.
Okay.
And so this is the Big Island of Hawaii. I did this one on New Year's Eve of 2016. So this was my last day technically as a pro. I was still under contract professionally to the end of that year. And I was supposed to have a job. I had like a job lined up at a sports agency um, to start in January, and that guy ended up either quitting that job or getting fired. I don't really know what happened, but I ended up not getting that job. But I at the time I was like, I had been on Strava for a couple months. I'd been a pro for 10 years. It was like really emotionally difficult to kind of let that go and move on. I had no choice. And then I ride up the biggest climb in the world. And so it's from the beach to, sorry, I'm going to do it in feet. Maybe you can convert to meters. It's from the beach. You dip your bike in the ocean at the beach, and it was like a beautiful sunny day, 70 degrees. What's that? 30 Celsius. And then you go up to this volcano. Finally, you're up a highway, and then you make a left turn onto this dirt road that's like completely impossible to ride on a road bike. I was running with it on my shoulders. Now
Wow.
we're at like 14,000 feet.
Wow.
There's a wall of snow along the side because it was crazy high altitude. There's an observatory up there, and I got the KOM by 2 hours. I was just under 5 hours. It was just like it was more will than anything else, but it was the coolest ride I've ever done, and I'd never heard of it until like a week before. And there was this moment for me of just like, there's a lot of cool stuff to do on bikes that isn't bike racing. The ride got crazy response on Strava, and I was like, there's a lot of value to be had for adventures and pushing yourself, and there's value for my fitness that's not like in this European racing world that wasn't really suited to me and was pushing me out. So that was kind of like the beginning of my whole next chapter. I was like, wait, there's something here, and I didn't have it on video. I was like, Instagram live the whole time and kind of enjoying myself. But I got to go back there and film it. But it kind of showed me like there's stories to tell, and there's a place for me in this sport yet, which gradually turned into worst time than ever.
Okay, that's a nice way to transition from your time, 10 years as a pro, to becoming now a full-time YouTuber, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And you call it the worst retirement ever. So can you expand on what you mean by that worst retirement ever and how that all came about?
Yeah, the angle was really that, like I kind of the beginning of it. So it was end of 2016. I knew I was gonna retire. I don't like the word retire when you don't have any money saved up, but that's the word they give you when you stop racing professionally. Um, so I knew I was going that direction. I was going to get a job, and I just started. I'm not even sure why. Oh yeah, I was hosting a fondo. I started doing this event in Malibu, and it was my business partner for that was like, you should get on this Strava app. Like you should start engaging with an audience here. And he just purely was just wanting to sell entries to our event. Um, so I get on there, and I think like the first ride I did the group ride in LA that I like to do, which rips up this little canyon in Hollywood. And of course, I set the KOM for this climb that I'd done a few times, that I'd never done it on Strava. And the person who had the KOM previously, was the name on there was Thorfinn Sasquatch, which was a fake name, and I guess he was just like this Strava villain in LA, and no one knew who he was. And he had the bottom of every hill, the top of every hill, and like a lot of pretty competitive racer types were not able to beat him on any of it. Um, and then someone kind of did the detective work that he was to find his actual name, and it was a guy who was banned for doping from like Masters Nationals,
Oh,
like an age group thing in the U.S. So this like perfect storm for me, where like I'm a world class climber living in LA, and there's this like guy who just the cycling community in the city was just like very annoyed at,
yeah.
but no one could topple, and I have all this fitness and nothing to do with it. And I just noticed like I got that KOM, and my phone blew up like I had just won a big race. Like I was getting more text messages from
Wow.
that, like, oh, you got the
Right.
Nichols Canyon. And I was like, I won a stage of Tour of St. Louis a couple of years ago. Like, who cares? But my thing was like, if people enjoy it, then it's something to respond to, and that essentially turned into all of it. So I just, at that point, it was just I would do a rest day, and then I'd go for a Thorfinn KOM and repeat, and I could get them all. And over, like, honestly, like, he had hundreds of KOMs, and it took a couple of years to like slowly pick away at them.
Wow.
But that kind of developed a following on Strava, and Cycling Tips wrote an article about it that was widely shared. And it was just so perfect for me, because my career was I came into racing like right when kind of Lance's downfall happened, and the domestic scene, that like the US, there was a vibrant racing scene in the US in like the early 2000s. So like when I started, the guy who won the Redlands Classic was making six figures, and there were a lot of pro teams and a lot of guys. I think there were like 12 teams in the U.S. paying guys a living wage. Sorry, this is all in my books, but uh, by the time I won Redlands in 2012 for the first time, and my salary was $18,000 that year. My team folded, so I only got half of that. So that was like, like doping really stunted my career and my chance to succeed. And just all the sport, the sponsors went away, and there were fewer teams every year, and it was just, I likened it like climbing a ladder as the rungs were getting chopped off underneath. Um, and then I go to Europe, where like I finally get on, Garmin Sharp, but I was 26, which is pretty late to have a real shot at that. Um, Politics didn't do me any favors with a clean tattoo and the world tour, and like they signed me. They had a lot of PR nightmares. So when they picked me up, it was they had just had Danielson and Zabriskie and Van de Velde had just served their like off-season
Yeah.
suspensions after catching Lance, and Hejjedal had admitted that he had done it, years before, and the statute of limitations was up. But he'd won the Giro in between, so like JV kind of had a mess. And here's this like American guy who was doing pretty well, who had a clean tattoo, and Vaughters, like, I realize now, he like had to sign me, just to shut everyone up in a way. But they never took me seriously, and they didn't want to sign me, and they didn't really like me, was what I noticed too. So like the directors, I just got shitty races, and I never really had a great chance. I'd be, on the list for this race and pulled off it 2 days before and sent somewhere else. So like you can't really train for that.
No.
So I kind of had a few years of that, and then I was just like, all right, forget it. I'm 30. I can't, and now also like barely paying me. I got World Tour minimum my first year on that team, and then 65,000 the next year, which is nothing to sneeze at, but it's also, try keeping an apartment in LA, an apartment in Girona, and paying for organic food. Just the athletic, like the whole athletic lifestyle I was chasing, like I wasn't going to get it. Um, so it was easy to move on from that. And then here's this doper who has all these KOMs, and I can handle that. Here's this little thing where like, okay, here's the dopers got me the last 10 years, but
Okay. Yeah.
here's this little corner where like, all right, I can do this. And I did. It was fun, and like, to me, like Strava, it's a social media platform. It's not a race. I've done races. There's no reason to care about the KOMs, which is the irony of doping for it. You don't get anything for a KOM.
Yeah.
So like the idea of someone cheating for it or doing whatever he was doing was hilarious, and I just it was a fun thing to mess with. And quickly since, so my channel turned into, I go for doper KOMs. That was the first year I went for a Danielson one, I went for a Chris Horner one, I went for a Levi Leipheimer one, and I didn't have, I had certain level of success with those. So that's one, like, okay, Leipheimer got this KOM in Boulder, stage 7 of the Tour of Colorado, with a bunch of energy bars in his pocket and 2 bottles on his bike, and I go for it with a speed suit, completely fresh. I actually didn't get that one, but that was, I found like I could kind of compete against those guys if I did a pure uphill time trial, recovered, and they happened to get a KOM during the middle of a race or something, or a big workout block. Um, but obviously, like, I'm not better at peak dopers than their whole time. Um, Eventually, not didn't take too long before I realized, like, I don't want to make my post career about doping. I don't want it to be about revenge. I didn't like the negativity of it. It was the kind of thing that worked. It got attention pretty quick. I was like, I just want to go for adventures and fun climbs that I want to do, that I think people might want to see. Um, so that's kind of been the last few years. It's just like, I want to see what I can do on this climb. And people would kind of message me like, hey, here's a cool one you should check out in Tennessee, or whatever. So like less Eurocentric and more American, but just cool places, and not like kind of just rejecting the whole pro cycling and doping culture that rejected me first.
It sounded like a sort of redemption almost for your, what sounded like a bit of a crappy experience being a pro, after reaching that the dream job for a lot of people, and finding it wasn't actually paved with gold, and it wasn't the dream experience you hoped it would be. So maybe a bit of redemption, proving you're one of the world's best
Exactly.
climbers on Strava against these
Exactly.
dopers. So
I was able to do what I wanted later. The dream that I end up, that I'm kind of living now, and it's still a lot of work, but is something that, like, I wouldn't have imagined when the pro sport was kind of kicking my butt.
yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
now you're a successful YouTuber, over 100,000 subscribers, and you're not only riding these KOMs, but you're filming them as well. So you're producing content around your love of climbing, and not just climb, but adventure as well. So what's it like being a YouTuber?
it's fun. It's, I get to do it on my own schedule. It's an insane amount of work. So the business model now, like, the YouTube revenue is like kind of a myth. Like, you get checks, but it's not what people think, until you have like 10 million subscribers or something. It's one of those, like, yeah, I think last month I got like $1,400, which is great. But I think I've made 600 videos to get that. So like on a per basis, and when you look at the cost, like YouTube revenue isn't the thing. So, but
Yeah.
what I was able to do was, I had sponsors from racing, I had relationships with brands, and I kind of carried a lot of those over into, a lot of guys do these ambassador things, and they do events and stuff like that. And so instead of like me going to Grand Fondos and doing gravel racing, I just got the same kind of sponsorship levels to create content. Um, so since then, I make all my own deals. I write all the contracts. I do all the outreach. So it's like, that's kind of a full time job, and then editing is kind of a fair bit. I outsource as much as I can. I have some help pretty often, but not always. And I find a lot of times it's just easier to just have the selfie stick and control it. Um, but for the most part, it's just a complete joy and a luxury that I kind of like get to. Like, I don't have a schedule. I don't have, like, no one ever tells me what to do. I have to do a lot,
Yeah.
but it's what I want,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a really great place to be.
And there's quite a trend for retired cyclists now, especially in the gravel scene, becoming a
Mhm.
sort of own content creating machines almost, and having their own sponsors and their ambassadors for different brands. And it sounded like you were kind of doing this before that became as popular as it is now. So setting the sort of mold for that sort of a growing trend for influencers, whatever you want to call them these days.
Yeah, I hope so. I do want to think that, like, I kind of created a business model that's somewhat replicable. Like, I don't think going for KOMs on Strava, I don't think there's room for a bunch of guys to do that. But I think there's room for, I guess, another take that I had from retirement and what I'm doing now is that pro cycling in a lot of ways is like, kind of a poor way to promote a brand. That for I know what they charge for a pocket spot, um, and it's excessive. And what I could do for that same amount of money, and what a gravel racer could do, or for much less money, is really just a lot more in a lot of cases. So like brands, they need to be in the Tour de France to be viable. I guess I think that's still a thing, or they at least they think it is in a lot of cases. Um, but but I noticed, like, as a pro, I mean, I probably rode for 5 or 6 years, and I didn't ride with anyone who bought their bicycle. Like you ride with pros when you're a pro. And now, like, I ride with people who buy things. And it's just, it's a very different, like I do the group ride in LA on Sunday. It's kind of my favorite part of the week. Um, and no one on there gets a free bike but me for the most part. And that's valuable to brands. And social media is valuable to brands, and the pro teams kind of, until recently, like, didn't do a good job leveraging that. So we're seeing a lot of it, and I think the riders who kind of realize that, or are willing to do this extra work and maybe like have a down year to do that, are going to see some success in going their own way if they have that little bit of hustle.
Okay, yeah. So climbing definitely your thing, your USP. Have you always loved climbing? You've always been good at climbing? Did it come naturally to you?
Yeah, I think so. I was like always, I don't know. I'm a skinny guy who has a fair bit of power, so kind of like a good build for climbing. When I started racing, I was in college in Florida, which is like the flattest place in the United States. And I thought I was a time trialist, and I didn't know about climbing. And we remember I went to a few big races that year, and the one of them was like the Tour de Tuna in Pennsylvania, was like one of the bigger American stage races back then. And I was just, I think it's like my second year racing. I was like 12th going over the climbs. Like I was in the front group going over this hill, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm a climber. I just had no idea. So it was a combination of like liking it and then being good at it, and now, yeah, it's just my favorite thing to do. I don't know what it is about riding uphill, but I can't live without it. And
I see
and I
from your,
moved somewhere with the craziest hills in the U.S., so
okay, so
that was
I
fun.
see from your Strava you do a lot of hilly rides where you go out of your way to find climbs rather than avoid the climbs, don't you? By the looks of it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not interested in flat roads at all anymore. Um, it's just, and where I live in Malibu, there's just so many awesome hills in between. I kind of live between Hollywood and Malibu, and just each of those just crazy cluster of weird neighborhoods and hills that go nowhere and are surprisingly empty for being really close to the city.
Okay.
So it's a good playground here.
What makes a good climb in your opinion? Is it steep? Is it kind of long and steady, hairpins, straight, flat, or
Love a good switchback. In general, like, steep is fun. I don't want it to be so steep that I have to stand or grind up it. Um, so really, like, I guess my favorite kind of climb would be like in the 7%, where like I still have the gearing for it. I can
okay,
choose the gear I want. If it's a sustained 15%, like no one really enjoys that. But once in a while, but I don't want to do that all day. So the ones I do around here, it's just my thing is to do 5 hours and 10,000 feet, so like a little over 3,000 meters.
okay,
That's
yeah.
like, that's kind of, try and do that once or twice a week, and that's sort of my endurance day, and enough to stay in shape.
Ouch. That's quite a lot of riding.
Yes, I mean, it's not that hard if you have enough hills. It's really just about not riding flat roads at all.
Yeah. Okay. And I
For
assume you got some sort of super tricked out, weight weenie, lightweight bike then.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have so Factor is my sponsor.
Okay.
I have the Shimano components. So for I have a few different bikes. The Ostro is Factor's like aero bike, so that's probably what I do most of my riding on. And then I have an O2 disc that I've actually had a few years now that's still fine. That I do a ton of training on. And then for my KOMs, my videos, at least, yeah, up until very recently, I used the rim brake VAM. So the Factor VAM is like it's same geometry, but just like a kind of fancier, lighter, stiffer carbon. Just like a more high end frame. And so I built that up with just, the dorkiest parts I could sort of get to, and tubular wheels and that kind of thing. So I'll do my videos on like a tubular kind of race setup, and then everything else is just kind of tubeless training. I do have a new factor frame that I'm going to reveal. I'm doing a charity thing in the middle of May, so they sent me a cookie bike for
Okay,
that I'm
cool.
going to share soon. We're getting that built up now.
I look forward to seeing that. So, how important do you think weight is on a climb? I mean, lots of people obsess about weight, like both on the body and the bike. I mean, how important is it? Is it the most important thing, or is it not as important as people make out that it is?
I mean, it depends on the gradient of the climb. I think like under 20 miles an hour is where I go. And sorry, I'm standard. I just once I wherever I live, that's the metric I go by. So here it's miles and feet. But the Yeah, I think aerodynamics certainly matters. But what's interesting, the group ride that we do on Sundays in LA, it starts up this climb, and the KOM is like 9 to 10 minutes, is like a fast time, and I rip up this climb every Sunday for the most part for like the last 5 or 6 years. So I have a crazy amount of data on this one hill that I do. It's not exactly a time trial because there's other people involved, but um, yeah, I still it's only, I think it averages 4%, but there's a very steep bit at the end. And I go faster, even if it's a 4%, I go faster on the super light bike than the aero bike, which is like a 2 or 3 pound difference. Um, but I thought the aero bike I would have thought the aero bike is faster on a 4% gradient. But it's not. And then you get it, then you realize too from that amount of data just how much conditions are everything
Okay,
on
yeah,
Strava, and like not even wind, like air pressure and weird stuff like that. Like an overcast day, a day where if it rained overnight, you're significantly faster. Like my fastest times are not at all correlated with my best watts on that climb, which is really interesting when you just go back and look at it. It's just like, wow, this is not at all what you would think. Um, but like obviously body weight that counts more than bike weight. So here's,
okay.
I weigh 152 pounds this morning,
Yikes.
um, and so you could shave a pound off your bike, which is an extra couple $1,000s, uh, or it's your own body. So I don't love how I don't want people to get eating disorders. Weight was like a thing that I saw people fight when I was racing, and you've got to do what your body needs to do.
Yeah.
But and you can definitely like be too thin and not be healthy and all that stuff. But yeah, weight is it definitely matters. Power to weight is what climbing is.
And how do you manage to keep your weight off when you got I mean, you're famous for your love of cookies.
Well, that's part of it. Part of the cookie thing came from I love cookies, but I'm a healthy person, so I'm not going to eat a bad cookie. So I'm selective with my cookies. So
Okay.
that's kind of the thing, is like I'll have a cookie once a week, but it's an incredible cookie
Okay.
because I'm only going to have it once in a while. So it's that kind of has been the thing. That's the same thing with food in general. Like if you're gonna, I try not to eat too much, red meat. I'm trying to be, good for the environment. So, once a week I'll have a steak and I'll respect it.
Okay.
And I'll do a good job and be careful, or like go to a restaurant and, get it well made. So cookies, yeah, it's the same thing. No, I don't eat 60 cookies a week. I eat one incredible cookie a week. That's the angle there. Yeah,
It's a quality over quantity, definitely.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
I was gonna ask you that question. Yeah, but what's your favorite cookie?
I mean, I'm a classic, like a chocolate chip person, and then there's a few places in LA that make top notch cookies that I probably have three, and then it depends on what mood I'm in. If I want it to be chewy or crunchy, I like the sea salt on there, and then it's all the other factor that I can't control is how fresh is it going to be at one of the three bakeries that I frequent. So a little bit of roll of a dice there, but I always know there's a few spots, like I always know it's going to be a good cookie, and then it's like, is it going to be melty and warm today, or did they make it this morning and I got in at 2 o'clock? Um, so that's always part of the adventure.
Any plans to make your own line of cookies? Phil Gaimon cookie line.
Yes and no. I do already. I have. So part of the thing is like the cookie thing. The way it started was just really organic and pure and accidental. So I was writing when I I have an English degree. When I graduated, I rode for all these low level American teams for no money, and part of the way I got by was freelance writing. So I had a blog
Oh, really?
for Bicycling Magazine back then. Um, so this is like 2009, 2010, and it was so I think I forget how I started. Like again, I always like cookies, but everybody likes cookies, so there's nothing special about that. But I went to a race and I had a rough weekend because they all were back then, and I was like, this sucked. But if you're ever here, I highly recommend a great cookie here. So that was like kind of how I ended it. Of just like this, I didn't want to sad ending. I really enjoyed this cookie in this town that you've never heard of and won't visit. And then at some point, like a few weeks later, someone was at a race and was like, hey, I saw you like cookies, and I know this place here. I got you one. And so I would would tweet that to my 500 followers at the time, like, oh, this guy, got me a cookie. And then I had a page on my website that's still up of cookie ratings. So I just like my favorite cookies in the US would just be kind of ranked
That's
and it
cool.
would move around. And I pretended it was really competitive. Um, and so that cookie thing, like over the next 8 or 9 years, kind of snowballed to my last year racing. The bus would pull up in a parking lot, and there'd be 5 people outside with plates of cookies for me, which was just the most awesome, pure thing in the world. Just strangers like bringing me cookies, and they weren't poisoned, and I ate them all. Was the team? I would share with the mechanics and stuff, but I don't think I ever like threw one out. Um, and so I didn't want to I wouldn't want to get sponsored by Oreo and be like, hey everybody, I like cookies, buy these. That would
Okay, yeah.
ruin the purity of it. I think it's too beautiful to do that. But what I did do for the 2020, we had to cancel my cookie fondo in Malibu. Everything got canceled that year. So instead, I had the idea of we do a bake your own cookie fondo, so people could sign up. It was way cheaper than doing the real event, but we sent recipes to do. I sent some route guidelines. If you lived in LA, it's like here's the routes that I think would be fun for you to do. So I kind of like curated the whole weekend experience of here's where you get this dinner, here's where you do that, and that included packets of cookie mix, so you could bake your own cookies at home, and people really liked that. So we kind of continued to make that. And so it's philscookies.com is our, we have like a subscription cookie mix service. So it's not cookies, you've got to make it. But part of the thing too is like they're going to be fresh. You go to the grocery store and you're getting a stale cookie and it's going to live on your counter for 4 days and it's no good. So here's like their packets. They make, like 6 to 10 cookies and you eat them at once. You put one in your bag for every ride every day. Um, yeah, and it's been like a fun little business, and people get a subscription, so you get like 2 packets a month, just show up at your door.
That's cool.
So yeah, I'm not going to sell cookies, but I've been selling like a kit, which is a good in between for me. I don't feel bad about it.
Okay. Um, Talking of cookies, I know you, as well as being a successful YouTuber and a Strava KOM expert, you're also organising a Gran Fondo. I
Mhm.
guess there's some lots of climbing and lots of cookies on that event.
Yeah, that is basically the summary. So it raised money for No Kid Hungry, which does a
Okay,
really good job.
that's nice.
There's a group of cyclists that do a fundraiser for them called Chef Cycle, and so it's a lot of chefs. I kind of met it through. I got involved with this through a chef friend who I used to ride bikes with. He got into mountain biking and downhill. I'm too scared to ride with him anymore. But they do an annual ride, and it's like a bunch of celebrity chefs, and they raise money for No Kid Hungry. Um, so I kind of teamed up with them. So they cook this incredible post ride meal, just like a handful of like really high end LA restaurant partners cook at the end of this. So you're sweaty and disgusting, and you're eating like Michelin star food
Wow.
in a tent. And so we have cookies every 10 to 15 miles. And the other part of it was like I came to Los Angeles, and if you come here as a tourist, you get stuck in traffic 100 times. You go to Hollywood Boulevard and you're accosted by homeless people. And until I lived here, I just had no idea how incredible the riding was. But the section of Hollywood has these beautiful hills, and Malibu more particularly has there's a kind of a stretch from the coast, the Pacific Ocean, and the beaches there. And there's Mulholland Highway is this beautiful twisty road at the top that every car commercial you've ever seen is this road. Like you've seen Mulholland 100 times, you don't know it. And then to connect the PCH to Mohan, there's just a million little hills that go up, and you have no business in there unless you're one of the rich people who lives in there. And the riding is, it's a 10-way tie for the best in the world, but it is incredible. And it's been really fun to kind of like use that event to help get the word out for folks who live in LA and maybe hadn't ridden there, or more importantly, like tourists to come out and like, hey, the at this point in January, February, it's just Canadian tourists just fly down and ride in Malibu because they're just trying to get out of the cold, and here's an awesome place to go. So just sharing like great places to ride is a big passion, and where I live is a good opportunity for it. So that's the main thing with Fondo. We opened registration yesterday, so it is on for this year. We got the venues and the permits, and that was touch and go, but all's good, and it's going to happen, and I'm super excited to get back to it after 2 years off.
Brilliant. I'll put a link to that down below, and hopefully maybe I can, if my diary's clear, get out there myself in October. And you wouldn't think LA would be a good riding. I mean, everyone knows about the freeway and the traffic, and you wouldn't think it'd be a good cycling paradise, really.
No, but it is. And like I'd had teammates come every year. Remember, like Davide Formolo came through, and like he just wanted to go to Universal with his girlfriend, and he looked at he was like, oh, it's like, oh yeah, this is okay. I see it. But yeah, you don't believe it until you're here.
Yeah, sounds good. So that's keeping you busy, and you've also launched your own cycling team as well, Jukebox Cycling.
Yeah.
What's that all about then? Can you tell us about that?
So it's not exactly my team. It's Jukeboxes Team, and they sponsor me.
Okay.
But they are my title sponsor, but I don't have any. I'm not the boss of anything. But I think they sort of just noticed what I was talking about before of like to sponsor a professional team is expensive, and depending on your level, the value can be questionable. And then there's all these people who are just doing cool things on bikes, either on YouTube or on social media, or racing, but races that like aren't getting the media. And so I think he Jukebox particularly, they're a fun brand. It's a printing and sticker company out of Vancouver. So like posters and calendars, just like anything you can imagine being printed, business cards, stuff like that. But they wanted to get into cycling, and I think he just looked at like, I could spend this much on a world tour team, or I could spend this much and just like collect people who are doing fun stuff, who deserve support, who represent my brand. And I hope there's more of that in the sport. I hope it keeps going in that direction, because I think it's sorely needed. And the folks that he picked up are all just like really doing cool stuff with it. So there's a handful of YouTubers and gravel racers, male and female. So you can also have a team that's like as diverse as you want. But to me, like, you don't have to be fast to be valuable to a brand. And I think the world is going to come to people who are creative and fun and do cool stuff and ride bikes.
Yeah, I think you're right. The scene is definitely changing from that traditional racing team to something which isn't easy to find by tradition, is it? Really, like
right. You just got to pick them out.
Yeah, that sounds good. I look forward to seeing the exploits of that team over the next few months and what we get up to. If I can get one final climbing tip from you, what would be like the biggest tip you give to anybody who's struggling on climbs or just doesn't feel they're a natural climber? What would be one bit of advice you give them to kind of get a bit of extra motivation?
The advice that I give, well, it's just do it a lot. Is the main. That's how you get better at anything. And like people ask for tips, and I did an Instagram post the other day where like someone kudos to a ride that I'd uploaded, and at some point I connected all my training to Strava, so it uploaded like every workout I did as a pro. And there was this ride, and it was like my coach gave me the workout of do 360 to 410 watts for this many minutes at this cadence, and I the terrain that I did it on, the climb was too steep. I wasn't able to hit the cadence goals and the speed at the same time. And I like wrote a paragraph responding to that and thinking like, maybe we could do this kind of workout instead. And my realization was like, that's what makes you fast, is just like many years of that level of dedication. And I was teammates with Dylan Van Barla in 2016. And I did Roubaix with him. We had very different Roubaix experiences. But he finished 19th, and I wrote in my blog back then, like the end of the paragraph was, like I knew I was retiring at that point, or I had an idea. But Dylan was 21, 22, and I was like, next year Dylan will be top 10. Someday he'll win. Like I wrote that in 2016, and then I was watching it yesterday, and I was kind of tearing up. So I was just thinking like, all the stuff that I did from 2016 to now, Dylan did one thing. Like Dylan was tasting this that whole time, and he knew he could do it, and he did it, and that's what it takes to perform. And that's like really a beautiful thing. We have to watch the fruition of. I'm getting emotional now. He's a super nice guy, but but so that's one thing is just that's the real answer. For the micro answer for people who are just looking to get better at their climb and not dedicate their entire decade to it, like Dylan, which I respect because that's a lot. Pacing a climb, the move is the way I like to do it is I divide it into thirds. So what I found is if I take the first third and the whole time I'm thinking go easy, and then the middle third I'm thinking go steady, and the last third now is the time I'm actually letting myself go hard. I find if that's the perception of my effort, the power file is actually flat because it feels easy when you start, but that's sort of the how it loads up in your body. And so I think that would be the best tip is to perceive your perceived exertion versus your actual effort, and the dividing into thirds has been very effective for me for just general pacing and intervals and all that stuff.
Okay, that's a good tip, the thirds. I might try it myself on
There we
on
go.
a climb this week. So,
Yeah,
brilliant, Phil. A pleasure to chat to you. Thanks for taking the time to chat to us today. And
absolutely.
it sounds like your retirement is going pretty well, to be honest.
No, yeah, I'm much happier now. I've found a place.
Oh, brilliant. That's good. Well, I look forward to just following you on Instagram and social media and how
Thanks
many
a lot.
more
Thanks for having me.
KOMs you get.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah, back at
Cheers.
you.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
So that was a fascinating insight into Phil Gaimon's worst retirement ever, which doesn't sound all that bad to me. An interesting experience as a professional cyclist and now a popular YouTuber, bagging Strava KOMs and sharing his love for climbing. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all again next time.